Hello, true crime fans. Welcome to Debate the News True Crime live on Chatter Social. I'm Joseph Lobosco, joined by our other host, Adrienne Barker. Tonight, we're digging into the chilling case of Dan Markel, a Florida State University law professor who was gunned down in broad daylight in 2014. It's a case that is everything: a shocking crime in a quiet neighborhood, a long and twisting investigation, and a courtroom saga that spanned nearly a decade. Beyond the murder itself, the story raises tough questions about how far a family will go, the limits of loyalty, and the challenges of pursuing justice when the suspects are people of means and close to the victim.
I'm Adrienne Barker. This case truly reads like a legal crime thriller, except it's all real. At first, there were no obvious suspects or motives, but as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered an elaborate murder for hire plot that pointed to an unthinkable source: Dan's former in laws. Imagine a family, Joseph, so desperate over divorce and custody battle that they would allegedly hire hitmen to kill the father of their own grandchildren. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Over the years, this saga saw multiple arrests and trials, each revealing new layers of the betrayal and the deception. It really is a heartbreaking story. Not only did two little boys lose their dad, but they eventually learned that members of their mother's family may have orchestrated his death. And even now, questions linger over whether everyone involved has been brought to justice.
A quick note before we continue: tonight's discussion involves violent crime and murder for hire that some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know needs support, help may be available via the Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. Please remember, Adrienne and I are not law enforcement officers, attorneys, or forensic experts. We do our best to research each case thoroughly, but the show is recorded live with little to no editing. Any factual inaccuracies are unintentional. And of course, any individuals we discuss who haven't been convicted of a crime, including certain family members in tonight's case, are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. The opinions of our guests and audience members are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of myself, Adrienne, or Debate the News.
Okay, here's how we're going to proceed. First, Joseph and I will walk you through a detailed timeline of events. That's from the day of the murder in 2014 through the years of investigations and then up to the recent trials and verdicts. Along the way, we're going to highlight how the evidence emerged and what each new development revealed about the plot. Then we're going to weigh in on the case and we're going to have a discussion with our guest contributors and live audience right here on Chatter Social. So if you're listening, come join Chatter Social. It's chattersocial.io. Get it on your app store. It's free. Download it. Come on into the room. Let us know you've been a listener. We want to hear from you. Then, when it's all done, we're going to wrap up with our thoughts on the outcome, the cultural impact, and the unresolved elements that remain. So, this is Debate the News True Crime. Let's dive into the timeline of the Dan Markel murder case. Joseph, you are up first.
July 18th, 2014, the murder. On a late Friday morning in the upscale Benton Hills neighborhood of Tallahassee, 41-year-old law professor Dan Markel was shot twice in the head at point-blank range while sitting in his car in his own driveway. Critically wounded, Dan was rushed to the hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries the next day. From the start, police sensed that this was not a random crime or a burglary gone wrong. Nothing was stolen, and the attack seemed personal. In fact, within days, the Tallahassee Police Department announced that Markel appeared to have been targeted specifically. This development immediately raised the stakes. Who would want this prominent legal scholar and father of two dead? Investigators learned that Dan was embroiled in a bitter custody battle with his ex-wife, Wendi Adelson, at the time of the murder. Wendy's family, the Adelsons, had been upset that she couldn't relocate their two young children from Tallahassee to South Florida after the divorce. This familial conflict gave police a possible motive, but in July 2014, there was no hard evidence pointing to any culprits. All they had were ominous clues. Neighbors reported seeing a mysterious silver-green Toyota Prius in the area that morning, and a witness recalled an unfamiliar man lurking near Dan's house shortly before the gunshots. Desperate for leads, TPD set up a tip line on July 21st and released a grainy image of the suspect Prius captured by a security camera, pleading with the public for any information. More than 50 tips poured in, and the puzzle pieces slowly began to assemble.
So interesting. It turned out that just 3 days before the shooting, on July 15th, 2014, a Toyota Prius matching the description had been rented in North Miami. Phone records, surveillance footage, and rental documents later showed that there were two men, 34-year-old Sigfrido Garcia and 30-year-old Luis Rivera. They drove that Prius over 400 miles from South Florida to Tallahassee. Garcia and Rivera arrive in town in the early hours of July 17th, 2014, and they even got a motel room for the night under an acquaintance's name. So by the next morning, which would have been July 18th, they were in a position near Dan Markel's home. So investigators believe that as Dan was pulling into his garage around 11 a.m., Garcia approached and fired the fatal shots through the driver's window. After the murder, the duo sped away in the Prius. This carefully timed sequence, now let's go through it, the rental car, the long drive, the quick escape, they all had the hallmarks of a murder for hire plan rather than a spontaneous act of violence. Still, though, late 2014 and 2015, the case remained unsolved publicly. Frustration in the community grew as months passed, no arrests. On the 1 year anniversary of Dan's death, an anonymous donor even offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to a conviction.
Behind the scenes, law enforcement hadn't been idle. In April 2016, nearly 2 years after the murder, the FBI and Tallahassee police orchestrated an elaborate undercover operation to probe the Adelson angle. An agent approached Dan's former mother-in-law, Donna Adelson, under the guise of being an extortionist who knew about the murder plot, a so-called bump operation, they call it. This prompted Donna's son, Charlie Adelson, to meet with the suspected go-between, Catherine Katie Magbona, at a Miami restaurant called Dolce Vita. Unbeknownst to them, the FBI recorded their conversation on April 20th, 2016. On the muffled recording, Charlie and Catherine discussed a problem with an unnamed person trying to blackmail them, speaking in veiled terms about money and a quote-unquote paper someone was given. Conversations that, in hindsight, appeared to be about the Markel murder and the undercover bump note. This tape would later become a key piece of evidence, though at the time investigators still couldn't make immediate arrests off of it alone. Meanwhile, tangible progress came a month later. By May 2016, investigators had gathered enough evidence to move on the hitmen. On May 24th, police interrogated Sigfrido Garcia, the suspected triggerman. Garcia flatly denied ever being in Tallahassee or knowing anything about Dan's homicide. But phone GPS data and rental records told a different story, firmly placing him on the scene. The very next day, officers arrested the 34-year-old Garcia in Broward County and charged him with first-degree murder in connection with Markel's killing. At a press conference, TPD officially named Garcia as a suspect and revealed that a judge had sealed key documents in the case, a hint that more suspects were identified behind the scenes. Sure enough, those documents were unsealed on June 2nd, 2016, and they dropped a bombshell. A second hitman, Luis Rivera, was named, and most stunningly, the papers established a connection between Garcia and the Adelson family. The probable cause affidavit outlined an alleged conspiracy tying Dan Markel's murder to his South Florida in-laws. How were they connected? Through Catherine Magbona, who was Sigfrido Garcia's longtime girlfriend and had also been dating Wendy's brother, Charlie Adelson. Investigators now publicly allege what many had suspected, that Charlie, on behalf of the Adelson family, had orchestrated a hit on Dan Markel, using Magbona as a conduit to hire Garcia and Rivera. On June 17, 2016, a Leon County grand jury formally indicted both Garcia and Rivera for first-degree murder. The state even announced it would seek the death penalty against Garcia, the alleged shooter, given the contract-killing circumstances. The case that had languished for 2 years was suddenly accelerating, and the ugly motive was laid bare. Prosecutors said Dan Markel was executed because the Adelsons plotted his killing in the wake of Dan's bitter divorce with Wendi Adelson.
With Garcia and Rivera both in custody, attention turned into Catherine Magbunwa. I know I said that wrong. The woman caught between the hitman and the Edelsons. So on October 1st, 2016, Magbunwa was arrested in Broward County and charged with first-degree murder as the alleged facilitator of the plot. Amazing. Wow. By this point, investigators has also flipped one of the hitmen, Luis Rivera, who agreed to cooperate with the state. Just days after Catherine's arrest on October 4th, 2016, Rivera pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree murder in exchange for a 19-year prison sentence and his testimony against the others. In his profile, Rivera, a Miami gang member already serving time on unrelated charges, admitted that he and Garcia carried out the shooting and he implicated Catherine as a link to the Adelson family. Rivera later testified that the murder was arranged for a $100,000 payout. Oh, that's interesting. That's the amount of the reward. And that Charlie Edelson was behind it, referring to Charlie as the dentist who paid the hit team. All the while, the Adelson family publicly denied any involvement. In 2016, their attorneys released a statement calling the speculation about their role categorically false, insisting that none of the Edelsons, Wendi, not her brother, not the parents, Donna and Harvey, had anything at all to do with Dan's murder. Despite those proclamations of innocence, evidence was mounting against Charlie and possibly Donna Edelson, Wendy's mother. Notably, investigators found that in the months before the murder, Donna had been emailing Wendi articles about irretrievably broken families and making comments suggesting Dan's removal would solve their problem. That was an ominous foreshadowing, right? Wendi herself, she had a bizarre anecdote in a police interview. Here's what she said. Charlie joked to her that he looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan as a divorce present, but claimed he was just kidding. And instead, he brought her a TV as a gift. Yeah, so he's joking around. I could go hire a hitman to kill Dan, but actually, I'm just going to buy a TV as a gift. Well, that joke, which Wendi said she dismissed at the time, now doesn't it sound like a chilling hint of the very real plan that was unfolding? So by the end of 2016, law enforcement had in hand the two hitmen. Now, remember, one is now state witness, and the intermediary, and they had openly named the Edelson family as the suspected masterminds. You guys keeping track of all this? I hope you have a piece of paper in front of you. This is a lot, right? Yet, curiously, no charges were filed. So there was no charges filed against, ready? Wendi, no charges on Charlie, no charges filed against Donna, no charges filed against Harvey Edelson at that time. So it appeared that the prosecutors were really being meticulous. And perhaps they were waiting for more evidence, which would be like the Dulce Vita recording to be enhanced, or hoping one of the arrested co conspirators would directly flip on the Edelsons. Anyways, Joseph, at this point, the case was far from over.
Fast forward to 2019, 5 years after the murder. Catherine Magbona and Sigfrido Garcia finally went on trial together for Dan Markel's killing. In a Tallahassee courtroom, prosecutors laid out the murder-for-hire scheme for the jury, arguing that Charlie Adelson had arranged his brother-in-law's assassination because the Adelson family was angry, desperate, and afraid of Dan's custody arrangement with Wendi. Their star witness, Luis Rivera, took the stand to recount the entire plot, how Magbona acted as the conduit for money and information, how Garcia stalked Markel's movements, and how Rivera himself acted as the getaway driver when Garcia shot Dan. It was a dramatic trial that at times felt surreal. Members of the Adelson family, who were in attendance but not charged, heard themselves cast as puppet masters of a cold-blooded hit. In October 2019, the jury returned a split verdict. Sigfrido Garcia was found guilty of first-degree murder. He would later receive a life sentence for pulling the trigger. But for Catherine McBona, the alleged middlewoman, the jury was deadlocked. They could not unanimously agree on her guilt. The judge declared a mistrial for McBona. This outcome was a blow to prosecutors who had hoped to secure convictions up the chain. McBona, who maintained her innocence, was sent back to jail awaiting a retrial. The mistrial also meant that, at least for the moment, Charlie and Donna Adelson avoided direct legal fallout. Still, the public perception was hard to ignore. By now, Garcia, the hitman, and Rivera, the getaway driver, were convicted conspirators, and their testimony pointed squarely at Charlie Adelson as the plot's instigator.
So McBona's retrial faced repeated delays. First set for 2020, it was obviously pushed back by the COVID-19 pandemic and defense motions, ultimately landing in May of 2022. But before that retrial could take place, a major development occurred. The authorities finally moved directly against Charlie Adelson. Technicians had spent 2021 enhancing the garbled 2016 Dulce Vita restaurant recording using audio forensics to make Charlie and Catherine's conversation more intelligible. And that improved audio, coupled with the existing testimony and evidence, that apparently convinced a grand jury to act. On April 21st, 2022, FBI agents arrested 45-year-old Charlie Adelson at his home, charged him first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder. This was the moment many had waited for. After nearly 8 years of suspicion, Dan Markel's former brother-in-law was formally accused of orchestrating the hit. Charlie, a South Florida dentist, pleaded not guilty and hired a team of high-powered attorneys vowing to fight the charges. His arrest came just weeks before McBona's retrial, sending a clear signal that prosecutors now felt confident in the case linking him to the crime. And indeed, McBona's retrial went forward in May of 2022, and this time the outcome was decisive. And after a 2-week proceeding, a jury found Catherine McBona guilty of all charges. And in July of 2022, she was sentenced to life in prison for the murder count, plus 2 additional 30-year terms for the conspiracy and solicitation counts. And facing the reality that she would spend the rest of her life behind bars, McBona's loyalties to the Adelsons were now in question. And then meanwhile, Charlie Edison from his jail cell awaited his own day in court, still maintaining his innocence. Wow, those dominoes in this case, Joseph, were really falling one by one.
They sure were. It's not looking good for the Adelsons at this point. Charlie Adelson's trial did not begin immediately. In a surprising turn, Catherine McBona agreed to cooperate and was expected to testify against her former boyfriend Charlie at trial. This was a significant shift. McBona had long refused to implicate the Adelsons, but with her conviction upheld, she perhaps hoped for some goodwill or simply sought to tell the truth. The trial commenced in Tallahassee on October 23, 2023, attracting national attention. Over the next 2 weeks, the prosecution presented a meticulous case against Charlie. Jurors heard the Dolce Vita recordings, with prosecutors walking them through the coded language. They saw evidence of the cash Charlie had allegedly funneled to McBona and listened to McBona herself testify that Charlie was the one who initiated and financed the hit on his brother-in-law. The defense, in turn, tried to pin the entire scheme on McBona, absurdly suggesting that she had masterminded everything without Charlie's knowledge, a theory undermined by a mountain of evidence. It didn't take long for the jury to reach a verdict. On November 6, 2023, Charlie Adelson was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder. He showed little emotion as the verdict was read, but in the gallery, Dan Markel's family quietly wept with relief. At sentencing, Charlie Adelson received the mandatory life in prison for the murder, plus 2 additional 30-year terms to be served consecutively for the conspiracy and solicitation convictions. At last, one of the alleged masterminds of Dan Markel's killing was held accountable. Yet the saga wasn't over. In a dramatic twist, just days after Charlie's conviction, authorities moved to arrest the one remaining alleged co-conspirator, Donna Adelson, Charlie and Wendy's mother. Donna, who had been implicated through circumstantial evidence in that 2016 bump operation, had always been a person of interest but was never charged. With their son convicted, however, a grand jury finally indicted Donna as well. On November 13, 2023, FBI agents arrested 73-year-old Donna Adelson at Miami International Airport as she was about to board a one-way flight out of the country. She had previously purchased a ticket to Vietnam, which prosecutors suggested was an attempted escape. Donna was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation, essentially the same charges as her son. After a decade of suspicion, the alleged matriarch of this murder plot was now in handcuffs. She was promptly transported to Tallahassee to face trial, and at her arraignment in December 2023, she pleaded not guilty. It was a remarkable moment. By the end of 2023, 5 people in total have been charged in connection with Dan Markel's murder: the 2 hitmen, the go-between, and now Wendy's own brother and mother. 4 of them, Garcia, Rivera, McBonna, and Charlie, were already convicted and behind bars. Only Donna's fate remained to be decided.
2024 to 2025. So the legal proceedings against Donna Adelson moved slower due to her late arrest. Initially, her trial was set for 2024, but on the very first day of jury selection in September of 2024, Donna's lead attorney withdrew over a sudden conflict of interest, forcing a delay. And after some legal jockeying and a change of defense team, a new trial date was scheduled for August of 2025. As the years ticked by, Dan Markel's friends and family, they persevered in seeing justice done, commemorating the 10-year anniversary of his death in July of 2024 with a memorial, even as they steeled themselves for yet another trial. Finally, in August of 2025, Donna Adelson's trial begins in Tallahassee. She's now 75 years old. Donna appeared frail but alert as she stood accused of masterminding the plot to murder her former son-in-law. The trial lasted several weeks, during which jurors heard many of the same pieces of evidence from prior trials. The difference being that now the spotlight on the family matriarch, and prosecutors painted Donna as the driving force who hated Dan Markel for keeping her daughter in Tallahassee and who pushed her son Charlie into arranging the hit. They highlighted, for instance, how Donna had casually joked with Wendi about hiring a hitman in the past, and later made suspicious comments implying relief after Dan was killed. The defense, unsurprisingly, claimed Donna had no knowledge of any plot and cast blame solely on Charlie, who notably did not testify. In the end, the jury was not swayed by the defense. And on September 4th, 2025, over 11 years after Dan Markel's life was taken, Donna Adelson was convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation, and the murder for hire of her former son-in-law. And as the verdict was read, Donna reportedly gasped, "Oh my God," and broke down sobbing in the courtroom. And this once respected grandmother now faces a mandatory life sentence in prison. Her conviction made her the 5th person found guilty in the conspiracy to kill Dan Markel, a case that at one time seemed on the brink of going cold. And for Dan's family, especially his parents, the verdict was a bittersweet moment of justice. Dan's father, Phil Markel, told the court that he hopes Donna lives a long life to 120 alone in her jail cell, thinking every day about the devastation she caused. And with Donna's conviction, prosecutors have finally held accountable all the individuals that they deem responsible for Dan Markel's murder.
Even with these convictions, the Dan Markel case leaves some troubling unanswered questions. Chief among them, what about Wendi Adelson? Wendi, Dan's ex-wife and the Adelsons' daughter, was arguably the beneficiary of the crime. After Dan's death, she was indeed able to relocate to South Florida with the children, which had been her family's wish. Many have wondered if Wendi was involved in or had knowledge of the plot. She's always maintained that she was completely in the dark. In fact, Wendi testified in earlier trials under immunity and denied any role. And she even claimed to have cut off contact with her brother Charlie when suspicions about him arose. Officially, law enforcement has never charged Wendi with anything, citing insufficient evidence. And her father, Harvey Adelson, had also not been charged, though his name surfaced in some testimony. For example, Charlie's former girlfriend said Harvey helped launder money for the hit, a claim Harvey denies. To this day, prosecutors have not publicly accused Wendi or Harvey of wrongdoing in court, and both remain free. They're presumed innocent under the law, but in the court of public opinion, suspicion hangs over them. It's a rare and unsettling dynamic. A mother and son have been convicted of murdering someone essentially for Wendi's benefit, all while Wendi herself walks free. Some believe Wendi may have tacitly welcomed the murder. She did, after all, make curious remarks, like changing her kid's last name from Markel to Adelson shortly after Dan's death. Others point out there's no proof Wendi asked for or agreed to any violence. Perhaps her mother and brother acted on their own in what they thought was for her own good. We may never know the full story. What is clear is that the Markel case isn't neatly tied up. Lingering questions about Wendi and Harvey's possible involvement continue to fuel debates and calls for further investigation. For the state, however, the case is essentially closed. The hitmen are imprisoned, and the two Adelsons who were directly linked by evidence have been prosecuted. Dan Markel's family has expressed gratitude for the convictions achieved, but they also acknowledge the painful reality that two young boys have lost not only their father, but now also a grandmother and an uncle to prison. In this sense, every outcome of the case is tragic. The ripple effects of this crime on the Markel children, on both families, and on the community will be felt for years to come.
Joseph, it's interesting. First of all, there's an incredible dumbness in these families that think that they could even do something like this, like hire a hitman. And now, because I'm such a fan of Animal Kingdom, I may think that I know what I'm doing, but like, how do you just think I'm going to hire someone, I'm going to have them kill it, but then they're never going to say anything? Like, come on, everyone always turns. Like, for a mother to think that it's more important for her children to be with her in South Florida than it actually is for her children to have their father in their lives. Right?
Yeah, that's basically the case and the motive that the prosecutors laid out. And you're right, it is incredibly stupid and just insane that people think that they can do stuff like this and get away with it. I mean, based on the evidence we know, neither one of them were very smart. They didn't cover their tracks very well. The person that they used as an intermediary worked in their office and was a known associate of theirs. It was like they couldn't have created an easier trail for investigators to follow to link them to this murder. And about the motive, I mean, the fact that you would, even feel like you're entitled to have a say in where your grandchildren move to over a court's decision and over the father of the children's decision who has joint custody, the fact that you would even feel that entitlement alone speaks volumes. But to actually have him murdered so that you can get what you want, not what's best for the kids, not what's best for your daughter, Wendi, not what she may want, to get what you want. That just speaks to an extreme level of entitlement. So the whole thing is wild to me.
I'm curious if her entitlement also came because were they wealthy? Did they have a lot of money? Or was their business a big business? Were they well known? Like, what gave them that entitlement?
Yeah, they were wealthy, reportedly well known, and well respected in their community. The father ran a dental practice, and the son followed in his footsteps and also worked at that dental practice. So yeah, they were doing great in life. They were doing great. And I guess maybe some of that wealth and that status led to some false confidence that they would be able to do this and get away with it.
Interesting. So let's go to this question, Joseph, because you mentioned Wendi. She was never charged. People feel that she must have known something. I mean, come on, did they like escape to the bathroom every time they were having conversation? I find that really difficult. And again, with my watching Animal Kingdom, they can't keep anything quiet. Someone's always lurking and listening in the corners of the room. So I'm kind of confused how she really wouldn't know anything. And I'm not saying she does. I'm just saying that I find that it's mysterious. So I'm curious, what do you guys think? Do you see Wendy as another victim or an indicted like co-conspirator?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Joseph. Yeah, I was really interested in this case because I felt really upset about it, thinking about this whole thing and how they wanted their children in Miami or wherever they were from, if they were in Tallahassee or something like that. But whatever her name is, the daughter, the mom, in trial, it was known that she passed by her ex husband's home the morning that he was murdered.
This is Debbie. So I don't know on this one. I don't know how much involvement Wendy had. I find it hard to believe that she had no involvement at all, especially with the fact of wanting to move those kids away, changing their name. I mean, who does that? Again, why would you wanna take kids away from their dad, especially when he seemed to be a really good and loving father? To me, at the end of the day, when you have a relationship that falls apart, and relationships do fall apart, and there are children involved, they have the right to have a relationship with both parents. Just because you have animosity towards each other, or maybe you just grew apart and you love each other still, but you just can't be together, whatever the case may be, you still are parents to those kids, and those kids deserve to have a relationship with both parents. And to try to take them away and move so far, that was really unfair. But to even change their names, I don't know. I have a hard time like really digesting the fact that she had nothing to do with it. Because I do think that at some point, in some way, she had to have. I just don't believe that she did not.
Debbie, to honor my husband, I would make sure that the kids, if they had that name, I wouldn't be so quick to change it myself, or so I think that how I would act. Was there anything else, Joseph, that made us feel that Wendy could have possibly been involved? And like they already got 5 people. Do they really need to go deep, Joseph, and try to even, put a case together on Wendy?
So I think yes. I think that if they had credible evidence or that they believed that she knew and she was involved, yeah, I definitely think they would pursue it. They've already gotten 5 people. Why not get the one person who benefited seemingly the most from it? In my opinion, though, I'm going to take a different take. And I purposely haven't looked on social media to see what the general consensus is, because I wanted to just go in based on the facts and kind of make my own decision. I actually don't think that she was involved. I don't think that she was on board with this, and I don't think that she was happy about it. Despite the fact that she did get to move the kids after, and despite the fact that she did change her last name, on the day that he got shot, I watched the interview in the police precinct between the detective and her. And her reaction seemed genuine. She seemed genuinely surprised, genuinely upset. And what struck me is that when the detective said, "Do you know anyone who could have done this?" she point blank said something to the effect of, "My family would never do this, but I know that they don't like him. I know that my brother had made jokes in the past about hiring a hitman. It was just a joke, but come to think of it, he actually did make that statement this morning about the TV." To me, I think that she had some idea that this could be a possibility, probably didn't think it was going to actually happen. And in that moment, it clicked to her, oh my God, they actually did this. And I think that she said what she said in that interview because she wanted them to get caught. I don't think she wanted them to do this. I think they did it on their own. And I think that she kind of threw them under the bus in that interview, but did it in a way that would make it seem like she was just recounting innocent things they had said.
I was gonna say, but I still have a real problem with why she changed their names. There was no reason to change their names, like, as their mother, they were born as Markels. Why would you change their names after their father has passed away?
Yeah, I agree, Debbie. To me, a mother and a brother who are capable of planning to hire a hitman and actually have the ex-husband killed speaks to an extremely toxic, unhealthy family dynamic with absolutely no boundaries. So the fact that they went to that extent just to enable the daughter to move near them tells me that there's an insanely controlling dynamic between the parent and the daughter. And the daughter being conditioned to that dynamic, even though she's an adult and living on her own and has her own family, I can see a scenario where she could, now that the ex-husband's gone, fall back into that dynamic. So maybe the parents said, you're going to change the last name. Here's the paperwork we already figured out, and she went along with it. You're going to move. We already picked out a place, et cetera, et cetera. I can see a situation where the changing of the last name, just like the move, was already something that the parents had decided, and she just went along with it.
Interesting. But Joseph, I have a question for you. How does a person actually trust a hitman?
That is such a great question, Adrienne, and something I was thinking about. I guess these people maybe they haven't watched Animal Kingdom, which shout out to Animal Kingdom. It's a great show. Listeners, by the way, check it out. Animal Kingdom. I guess these people didn't realize that if you hire a hitman to go and kill someone, you're involved. And there's no telling whether that person is going to sell you out if they get caught. So I think that this family underestimated just how messy it is to hire someone to murder your ex-son-in-law.
Definitely risky business. Joseph, it's interesting the $100,000 reward. Do they ever know who that came from?
You know, I don't know offhand who it came from, but I know that when the FBI was watching them, they did something called a bump, where when you're monitoring a suspect, you do something to almost antagonize them into revealing something or engaging in a behavior that would give you some more evidence or some more leads. And that's what they did. They had a random person approach Donna, hand her a letter, and pretend to be someone who knew one of the hitmen. And they tricked them into believing that this is someone who knows about the murder. I know what you did last summer vibe.
Uh,
And if you don't help us monetarily, I'm going to go after that $100,000 reward and sell you guys out.
You know what's weird? How does a grandmother think of killing a father knowing how devastated your children can be? And I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one, but I do think that that kind of psychological trauma of losing your father, knowing that he was murdered, how do you recover from that? Well, like what? Is she thinking like, oh, I'll just give them therapy and they have all the money in the world and I'll give them a boat when they're 16? Like, that is so demonic.
Joseph was saying there were 5 people. There's 1, 2, mom, 3, son, 4. Who was the 5th one that went to jail? Was it the dad?
Yeah, so there were two hitmen, one that actually pulled the trigger, one that drove and helped plan it out. So the two hitmen, then the intermediary, and then the mother and the son who hired them.
Crazy, Amy, right? Like, I am sure that were sipping cocktails somewhere going, we got away with it. Look at us. Look at how lucky we are.
So I wonder if Wendi allows her children to see Dan's parents and think about grandparents' rights. They have none.
Amy, as usual, you bring up the best points. That is so absolutely true. And you know what? It's crazy to me that you're right, that grandparents don't have a lot of rights. That's really interesting though. Like, so literally they took away the grandparents too. So not only the children didn't just lose their father, they lost the grandpa. I wonder if they're seeing Harvey maybe, and then Dan's. Joseph, what do you think?
Yeah, so as far as I know, I don't think the children have any contact with the grandparents. I think that's still a very contentious situation, especially because Donna Adelson was just convicted on Thursday. We're recording this on Tuesday, September 9th. So less than a week ago, she was convicted. Hopefully, eventually, the children will be able to get some type of a relationship with the grandparents. But given the situation, given that this has been, 10 years, I don't know how that's going to work out. Before we close out, I just want to ask a couple quick questions to the audience. With 5 people in total convicted in relation to the murder of Dan Markel, this case seems all but solved. But some still doubt the guilt of those involved. Do you believe that the right people are in jail? Or is it possible that some or all of the people convicted are actually innocent?
I think they have the right people in jail, but I also think that they should make sure that they hold accountable everybody that was involved, and I think that them kind of considering the case closed to me is, still an injustice. I still can't believe that the daughter, the mother of the children, didn't have any knowledge, and what was the involvement of her father, and for me, until everybody had justice, it's not enough.
No, I agree that I think that the 5 people that are in jail are rightfully in jail. It'll be interesting to see over the coming weeks because the way the prosecutors have kind of gone through prosecuting this case is they get one person or 2 people, they prosecute them, then they move on to the next person. So Charlie was getting prosecuted, then Donna. So now that Donna is convicted, if they have any evidence on Wendi, I personally don't believe that she was involved, but that'll be something to look out for sure. So, one of the hitmen, Luis Rivera, received a 19-year sentence in exchange for testifying, whereas the other participants, Garcia, Magbona, Charlie, and Donna, received life in prison. Or 3 of them received life in prison. Donna hasn't been sentenced yet, but she will likely get life in prison as well. Do you think it's fair that someone who actually helped commit the murder could one day walk free while the other 4 of them are stuck in jail for life?
I don't think it's fair. However, sometimes you gotta take the little fish to catch the bigger fish, and that was the sacrifice that they made by giving him that deal in order to testify in the case. So, sometimes you have to weigh the entire situation. If they were able to get the bigger fish in the whole deal, then giving him somewhat of a deal was beneficial because that testimony was important.
It's so interesting to me, the whole flipping part of it and the psychology around it, and it's almost like every man for itself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting how they were all in cahoots on this at one point and then very quickly started to turn the tables on each other. All right, guys. The story of the Dan Markel murder case is both horrifying and thought provoking. It's horrifying in that it exposes how a bitter family grudge, a dispute over children and relocation, escalated to the point of cold blooded murder. A beloved father and scholar was executed essentially at the behest of his own former family. That's a reality that's hard to fathom and a stark reminder that sometimes the deadliest threats come from inside a family rather than from strangers. Yet this case also forces us to reflect on some important lessons. It highlights the persistence of law enforcement and prosecutors. Even though it took more than a decade, those behind this heinous act were eventually brought to justice. It underscores that no one is above the law, not a wealthy dentist, not a doting grandmother, and that with patience and determination, the truth can prevail. It's also a case that reminds us of the complexity of human morality. The Adelsons were a respected, educated family, and yet they convinced themselves that hiring hitmen was an acceptable solution to their problem. In the end, the Markel case stands as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of vengeance and the importance of upholding justice, even when the path is long and convoluted.
But it doesn't feel like a victory. It's more like a tragedy on top of a tragedy. Okay, think about it. 2 little boys lost their dad in the most violent way. The ripple effects of that kind of betrayal are immense. Dan Markel's parents, who have fought so hard for justice, will never get their son back. They have spent years attending trials and hearings, listening to the gruesome details of how their child was killed, all while having to face the people who planned it. It's heartbreaking. At the same time, Joseph, I admire the strength and the resilience of Dan's family and friends. They turn their grief into advocacy, pushing for changes like the Markel Act in Florida to help grandparents of murder victims stay in their grandchildren's lives. And I think that, Amy, that's probably what you were thinking of. So, the Markel Act. It's a small silver lining that out of this darkness, there's been some positive change to spare other families a bit of pain that they went through. Culturally, this case has made a lot of us reflect on how we handle domestic disputes and what red flags we might overlook. Who could imagine that behind the smiling facade of a family, such a murderous plot could brew? It's really made me think about the nature of justice, too. That justice isn't just about verdicts and sentences, but it's also about trying to heal a community and how to prevent future tragedies.
Exactly, Adrienne. That's a wrap for Debate the News True Crime. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth look at the Dan Markel case. We know this was a complex and heavy case with a lot of twists and turns, but cases like this, involving family betrayals, murder for hire, and a years-long quest for justice, are important to fully understand.
If you enjoyed this episode or learned something new, please subscribe to Debate the News True Crime on your favorite podcast platform. Joseph, we're on all of them. Amazing. And we also want to thank Jonathan Bing for Debate the News. And we're very proud to be under the umbrella. Again, we're live on Chatter. It's chat, CHATTER social. And you can find it in the App Store. Look for some blue bubbles and you'll see it. And come on in. It's really amazing. And just look for DTN True Crime and join our group, and you will get notified of our episodes. We record Tuesdays and Thursdays. So thank you so much. We're really happy to be here. And thank you, Debbie, so much. Kim, thank you for putting some your thoughts in the chat. Appreciate it. Renee, same thing. Denise, glad to have you here. Amy, so glad that you spoke up. And we've got Lisa, and we've got a lovely man called Doing Life. That's not his name, but what a great guy that he is. And every time I see him, Joseph, in true crime, I think it's like Doing Life in prison, but then I forget that no, he's the opposite way. He's actually the coach for Doing Life. So I love that. All right, I'm going to end it there. Thank you, Joseph.
Exactly, Adrienne. The Adelsons could take some lessons. They should be, doing life, enjoying their life, not conspiring to murder their ex-son-in-law, which now they are literally doing life in prison. As always, we appreciate you listening and being part of our discussion. We'll be back on Thursday with another case and another conversation to delve into. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.